Ladies and gents, boys and girls, welcome. Tuesday, October the 10th, 2023. Hope you're all doing well. Chris Phillips here, your host of the Daily Crow of the Spurs Up Show. Again, appreciate each and every single one of you tuning in. We have got a jam-packed show for you here on this Tuesday. I see Travi already in the chat, John Edward as well. Also, those in the Big Cock Club Discord, head over to the TDC Questions channel, the TDC Questions channel, to be sure your questions are answered there, guys. Again, a very busy day. We got a lot to discuss. Of course, Shane Beamer and company will be speaking to the media as well at 1:30, so be sure to stay tuned to social media. We'll have coverage of that. In our second hour, guys, we are calling an audible today. JC Sherbert had some things come up today, so no JC Sherbert. We're going to try to get him on later in the week, but instead, we have my good friend Chris Lee of Southeastern 14. He's actually going to call into the show and give us some insight on the SEC as a whole, Vanderbilt football, his thoughts on the Gamecocks as well, and kind of look at the SEC slate and SEC schedule, and just talk all things SEC football as a whole. So again, really excited, guys. You might recall I went on his show a couple of weeks ago, so really looking forward to chatting with Chris Lee. Those guys over at Southeastern 14 do a fantastic job talking all things SEC football. And in this first hour, guys, we're talking SEC power rankings. We're talking my bookie bets of the weekend. We're talking keys to victory against the Florida Gators, guys. Really exciting stuff as we begin our breakdown and our coverage and our analysis of Saturday's homecoming matchup against the Florida Gators. And oh, by the way, the State Fair in town as well. A lot going on in Columbia, South Carolina this weekend. Again, guys, thank you all so much for tuning in. Of course, with that being a home game, that does mean that TSUS merchandise will be available for purchase outside of Williams-Brice Stadium at the S&G parking lot right next to Waffle House. Also, Gator packs will be available courtesy of our friends over at Carolina Cigars. So be sure to stop by, get your merchandise, get your Gator pack so we can smoke them and celebrate the victory over Florida after that ball game on Saturday afternoon. But again, guys, thank you all so much. Again, there's tons to discuss, tons to get into. I'm sure Shane Beamer, a lot of interesting updates. Many of you have had questions about Juice Wells. Is he going to play? Is he not? What is the status there? And the latest that I can tell you all is that it sounds like, and of course, Shane Beamer will update us on this later in the day, but it sounds like that Juice Wells will not be a go this weekend against Florida. That is not because of the latest depth chart, because as we were just told just before we went on, that depth chart was just the same exact one carried over from Tennessee week to this week. So no real reason to read between the lines or try to deep dive into that. But from folks I've talked to, it does sound like there will be no Juice Wells available in this ball game on Saturday. So South Carolina will have to find a way coming out of the bye week to win this football game without one of their top playmakers. So we'll see if the Gamecocks can do that. Either way, guys, normally on Tuesdays, we start these conversations off with SEC power rankings, and then we get into best bets, and then we get into our keys to victory for whatever game it is upcoming that weekend, guys. I want to get straight into it, though. I'm excited. I'm pumped. A huge game this weekend coming out of the bye. So without further ado, guys, we jump right into it. My 3 keys to victory against Florida. What South Carolina must do to come out of the bye week and be victorious on Saturday against Billy Napier and the Florida Gators. And you take a look at this Florida offense, guys. It is no secret. I'm going to talk a lot about it this week. Stopping the run, slowing down Trevor Etienne and Montrell Johnson, that two-headed monster in the backfield. If you cannot stop the run and the Gators can run wild, you simply don't have a chance in this football game. I think that's really pretty much well understood at this point. But when you look at Florida, guys, not only do they like to run the football, and they're going to try to establish the run early with those two guys, they've actually found they've found some balance in their offense with Graham Mertz and the short passing game. It's a lot of dump off. It's a lot of nickeling and diming. They also utilized their tight end last week, who I thought was really, really good. Had a pair of touchdown catches in that football game. They're using that short passing game. Ricky Pearsall at the wide receiver position as well, to sort of be like an extended handoff and continue to supplement the run game and find some semblance of balance with a passing attack. You heard our good friend Chris Doring in the segment yesterday talk about, he'd like to see Florida stretch the field more. I think if you're South Carolina defensively, that's got to be your game plan going in. I think you stack the box. I think you press the corners, and I think you make Graham Mertz beat you with the deep ball. Now, is that a risk? Could you get beat with the deep ball? Could you get beat with the explosive play, the big play, if you will? Yes, you could. But I think the thing you cannot afford to do, you cannot afford to allow Florida to nickel and dime down the field all afternoon. You cannot allow Florida to play keep away and keep the football out of the hands of Spencer Rattler and Xavier Legette. This Florida offense has not been explosive by any means, right? But they do have a two-headed monster in the backfield in Trevor Etienne and Montrell Johnson. And Graham Mertz, he hasn't been great, but I think he's been much better than most folks gave him credit for, including yours truly. I had him 14th in our preseason SEC quarterback ranking. So he's been very efficient, right? It's because they utilize that short passing game. You've got to be able to take that away, put this game on the right shoulder of Graham Mertz, and I think play aggressively defensively, guys. What we wanted to see South Carolina do against Tennessee, and more so what we saw them do against Mississippi State. I think if you stack the box, you press against Florida, I don't think Graham Mertz is anywhere near Will Rogers. He's not going to be able to consistently hit those deep shots. And guys, if he's able to cash in a one or two, you tip your cap and you make the adjustment. But the last thing you can do is sit back, let Graham Mertz get comfortable, let Graham Mertz get in a rhythm with hitting these underneath throws, also while allowing Florida to get off 5 or 6 yards of carry. At that rate, guys, they're going to play keep away. Spencer Rattler, Xavier Legette, your offensive weapons are going to be sitting on the bench, watching from afar, and you're going to find yourself in a 4-quarter battle if you do not play aggressively defensively. So make Graham Mertz beat you deep. You know you got to stop the run, but you've also got to limit that short passing game. Make Graham Mertz go over the top. Do not let Florida nickel and dime you to death. My second key to victory, guys, really interesting stat that came up in my research. Opponents thus far this season, and you look at Florida defensively, the statistics, the numbers, they will tell you that Austin Armstrong's group has been the strength of this Florida football team. But here's an interesting stat. Opponents have been inside Florida's 40, okay, not just the red zone, not just the 20, inside the 40 25 times this season. The Gators are allowing just 3.2 points per possession. So they've been really, really good at holding their opponents to field goals and limiting the touchdowns, right? They've been really, really good at forcing field goals. Guys, my second key to victory in this one, you've got to convert in the red zone, right? You've got the home crowd behind you, right? You are at Willie B. You are desperate. You have to have this game. This is as close to a must-win as it gets for Shane Beamer and South Carolina football. Florida's been good in the red zone, but you're going to have to be better. You're going to have to convert. You cannot settle for field goals. I know this isn't going to be like an offensive shootout like Tennessee was. We're not expecting Florida to score 40 points or do anything crazy like the Gamecocks have seen their last couple of games. But the fact of the matter is, you're struggling defensively. The numbers reflect that. You're one of the worst in the SEC. So there probably will be points scored. And in a game like this where the spread is a field goal and we expect this thing to be a coin flip type of game, converting or not in the red zone, it can mean everything in a ball game like this, guys. Look at Texas A&M and Alabama last weekend. I know that's a different beast, obviously. We're talking about the Alabama Crimson Tide, but you look at what Texas A&M did not do in that football game. I mean, we see it on a week-in, week-out basis. Teams that are not able to turn those scoring opportunities into touchdowns versus field goals. And I'm not saying South Carolina should run the fake every time like I feel like they were trying to do against Tennessee, but it's just of the utmost importance. And that'll be the question, guys, for South Carolina. That's the question, not just this game, but moving forward for South Carolina offensively. When they get in the red zone, running the football has been a struggle. Are you able to man up and punch the football in with a running game? Are you able, is Mario Anderson able to find the hole, find a crease, and get in there when you have to run the football? That's the big question. So convert in the red zone. Again, Florida's been really, really good there, but a game like this, you settle for field goals too often, and I think that's something that absolutely could come up to bite you in the rear end if you're not careful. And guys, my third and final key to victory. And I mentioned this just a second ago. You're going to hear a lot of people talk about Cocktober and the magic of Cocktober and RIP Florida because of Cocktober. And that's all fine and dandy. But I will say, we've mentioned this before, South Carolina, under Shane Beamer, has been a different team on their home field, especially in the last year or so. You then look at Florida. Guys, they have been abysmal on the road under Billy Napier, winning just one game away from the swamp in his now going on his second year of his tenure. Use that to your advantage. Harness the home field magic. That is my third and final key to victory in this football game. Harness the home field magic. For whatever reason, it just seems like good things happen at Williams-Brice Stadium when the Gamecocks host a home game. Good things happen for South Carolina. It's like the football gods are smiling on you, right? I'm not saying home field means everything, but especially this year in the SEC, it means a lot. No doubt it means a lot in the SEC this season. We are seeing it on a week in, week out basis. So it kind of goes back to, converting in the red zone, scoring touchdowns instead of field goals. Hey, get the crowd involved, get the crowd juiced, get the crowd excited. Because if Willie B gets rocking, I know this game isn't technically under the lights. It's a 3:30 kickoff, which I think Florida really lucked up in this game not being a night game. But if you jump out on them early, you show you made some significant improvements over the bye week, it's going to be really, really tough for Florida, for Graham Mertz and company, that offense to operate. And I think that's when you see some things like some turnovers happen, positive momentum. Momentum's such a fickle mistress, but I think it's something that South Carolina can take advantage of them. Because, guys, make no mistake, take away the Vegas spread. I don't care if you want to factor that in or not. This is a coin flip game. This is not the... this is not, I think a lot of folks looked at this game over the summer in the preseason and said, oh, this is a blowout. Florida's no good. They're terrible, right? Florida, I feel like, was the sexy team to talk about. Could they finish below Vandy? Oh, yeah. Like that was the running joke. But this is a coin flip game. South Carolina and Florida, I think, are a much more even footing than maybe we realized or maybe we want to admit, to be totally honest with you. So, this is a coin flip game. Home field advantage can make all the difference, or at least a large part of the difference in this one. So harness that home field magic. Maybe it's something in defense. Maybe it's something in special teams. Maybe it's just Spencer Rattler doing what he's been doing all season long. But keep your crowd in it because you're going to need them for all 60 minutes to secure the victory in this one. So again, guys, looking back, my 3 keys to victory against the Florida Gators: make Graham Mertz beat you deep. Take away the nickeling and the diming and the explosive runs. Make Graham Mertz go over the top and beat your secondary to win this football game. My second key to the game: convert in the red zone. Guys, Florida very, very good limiting their opponents in regards to scoring opportunities. You've got to be able to convert more often than not, score touchdowns, and not settle for field goals. And finally, guys, harness the home field magic. If it ain't swaying, we ain't playing. Rock Willie B. Make it one of the most intimidating atmospheres in all of college football on Saturday, and make life a living hell for Florida for all 60 minutes in the ball game. Guys, that being said, we're going to go ahead and jump into our first break of the day. On the other side, we'll keep the conversation rolling here on this Tuesday, October the 10th. All that and more on the other side. You're tuned in to the Daily Crow. The Daily Crow is brought to you by our friends at Carolina Cigars. Carolina Cigars has been in operation since 2008, recently taken over by the Peterson family in 2020. Whether you're new to the cigar scene or whether you've been enjoying cigars your entire life, Carolina Cigars has the expertise and knowledge to make your visit to their shop enjoyable. Stop by for a fine cigar and experience their classic cigar lounge where people come together, share conversations, and become friends. So if you're into cigars and you're on Hilton Head Island, you really do need to go by and see them. They offer same-day shipping nationwide, free delivery island-wide for weddings and all special occasions. They're also proud to offer premium cigars at 9 outside humidor locations around Hilton Head Island, and they have special events throughout the year as well. They want to talk to you. They want to engage. They want to share with you their cigar selection they're very proud of and their beautiful cigar lounge. When you're in the Low Country, there's only one place for cigars. That's Carolina Cigars, and there's only one place I get my cigars. That's Carolina Cigars, Hilton Head Island's premier cigar merchant. Come and share your passion. It's all here at Carolina Cigars. Give them a follow on Instagram at Carolina_cigars, or give them a call today at 843-681-8600. That's 843-681-8600. Smoke them if you got them, and tell them that Chris from the Spurs Up Show sent ya. The Daily Crow is also brought to you by our friends over at A1 Air Quality Consultants. Headaches, coughing, running nose while in the office or just in your home, call A1 Air Quality Consultants to have your air checked today. From Columbia to Asheville, Anderson to Charlotte, they are your breath of fresh air for all of your air quality needs. Be sure to give them a call or shoot them a text today at 864-619-2092. That's 864-619-2092. You can also contact them via email at a1airqualityconsultants@gmail.com. Be sure to check them out. We thank A1 Air Quality Consultants for their love and support of the Spurs Up Show, and tell them that Chris from the Spurs Up Show sent ya.
Muscle Dougie, ho.
Ladies and gents, boys and girls, we are back here on this Tuesday, October the 10th, 2023. Hope you're all doing well, guys. If you do want to submit your questions, super chat on YouTube or the Big Cock Club Discord is the way to go. And again, we'll take those periodically throughout today's show. Of course, guys, a normal schedule this week, noon to 2 every single day. Tomorrow, we'll continue the conversation, breaking down everything with South Carolina's game against Florida on Saturday. Thursday, same thing. And then on Friday, we have our mailbag. Our Friday mailbag will return, taking your questions, your comments, your calls at 843-790-3377. And then, of course, on Saturday, it is game day, and so excited to lock back in the studio, watch all the games, and, of course, watch South Carolina in our post-game call-in show. Do not forget, we'll follow on Saturday, immediately following all of the action at Williams-Brice Stadium. The call-in show, I can imagine, win, lose, or draw, is going to be absolutely electric, and cannot wait to hang out and hear from you guys immediately following the game on Saturday night. With that being said, we keep the conversation rolling, guys. Our SEC power rankings for Week 7, as we have reached the halfway point of the 2023 college football regular season. It's crazy to say that. Either way, we start at number 14, the Vanderbilt Commodores, with yet another hapless performance. They go to the Swamp and lose that football game 38-14. I think there's some encouraging signs, though, with Ken Seals taking over at quarterback. And I tell you this, don't you think that Vandy wishes they had Mike Wright right now? Because Mike Wright is the backup at Mississippi State, but you think about what he offered in regards to a dynamic playmaker using both his legs, his arms. I'm not saying he was great by any means, but I feel like at a place at Vandy, you need that type of wrinkle, and the Commodores just simply do not have that right now. So Vandy stays in the cellar. I do think Ken Seals is their answer moving forward at the quarterback position, but as I've mentioned to you guys many times, I would be stunned if Vanderbilt won an SEC game this season. And it gets no easier for Vandy, by the way, as this weekend they go on the road to take on the Georgia Bulldogs between the hedges. So poor Vanderbilt. Pray for Clark Lee and all of your Vandy buddies out there. At number 13, we've actually got a new team at the number 13 spot. Unfortunately, it is the Arkansas Razorbacks. And I hate to see it, guys, because I don't know if I've got a soft spot for Arkansas or what have you. Met my guy Ty Richardson at SEC Media Days and the folks over at ESPN Arkansas. Really good people. Reminded me a lot of South Carolina fans, right? Their passion, their loyalty, their love for the Arkansas football program. But Arkansas is in a bit of disarray, and they are a bit of a mess, if you will. And things, again, get no easier for them either. They take on Alabama this weekend. Arkansas coming off that really, really tough loss to Ole Miss. What I'm most concerned about, guys, when it comes to Arkansas is this locker room able to stay together? Because the chatter in regards to Sam Pittman and his job status in Fayetteville, I mean, it's not so faint of chatter, right? Like, folks are really talking about, should there be changes in Fayetteville? Dan Enos is no good at OC. And I don't think Dan Enos is great either, because you look at the lack of production from Rocket Sanders. That's the most glaring and obvious thing. The offensive line's in complete disarray. Like, when I hear Arkansas people and I hear folks talk about Arkansas football and the offense, it reminds me a lot of the chatter that surrounded South Carolina last year and Marcus Satterfield and what was happening to the offensive side of the football. But guys, again, Arkansas is just in complete disarray, and I don't know where the answers come. I mean, it's hard to believe they're as porous as they are when you've got guys like KJ Jefferson and Rocket Sanders and some others. But I think it really goes to show, too, like how difficult navigating the SEC West is. If you don't have your ducks in a row and your team isn't solid and you have deficiencies or problems here or problems there, you're going to get exposed. And that's what's happening to Arkansas football, losing, 3 or 4 in a row now, I think it is. So Arkansas in the 13 spot in our latest SEC Power Rankings. At number 12, Mississippi State moves up a spot. And yes, I know they just beat Western Michigan, but the flip here, the switch between Mississippi State and Arkansas, it's got a lot to do with simply how bad Arkansas has been. In Mississippi State, I think I'd probably take Mississippi State right now to beat Arkansas on a neutral field. I would probably take the Bulldogs to beat Arkansas right now. Either way, they got the big win over Western Michigan. We'll see what it means for Mississippi State and Zach Arnett moving forward. They need to build some momentum, certainly, because I think Zach Arnett right now is vying for, hey, I'm the long-term answer, and I'm not sure Bulldog fans are really convinced that that is the case. At number 11, we've got the Auburn Tigers, who were on the bye week. Obviously, they got a big game this weekend, taking on the LSU Tigers, which, of course, it's at Jordan-Hare on the Plains. Weird things happen. For Auburn, they got to start finding some offense. I mean, defensively, they're as physical as they've been in years, right? I mean, you look on film, you have not seen this type of physicality from Auburn in quite some time, but offensively, it's just, is it Peyton Thorne? Is it Robbie Ashford? What is Hugh Freeze? What buttons is he able to push? And, hey, they should have an opportunity to move the football this weekend against the LSU Tigers, an LSU team that cannot stop anybody at this current juncture. So number 11, the Auburn Tigers. At number 10, I've got the South Carolina Gamecocks. They stay right put after a bye week. Were 10th last week. They stay 10th this week. Of course, the opportunity to move up this week with a big game against the Florida Gators. The big question for South Carolina, guys, is just who are they, right? Because you look at the overall record, 2-3, not good. 2 wins over Furman and Mississippi State, right? There really isn't a high-quality win to hang your hat on. You then look at the losses, though. 3 losses, all to ranked opponents, right? And if that's all you knew, you would say, okay, well, South Carolina's probably a good team. They just played a grueling schedule. But then you look at how the losses have happened. Allowing over 20 sacks to this point. Not being able to run the football. You look at the poorest defensive numbers, and you're just like, okay, is South Carolina 2-3 because they've played a really tough schedule? Or is South Carolina 2-3 because they're just not very good? And so we're going to start to learn that as the Gamecocks get into some of these swing games against Florida, Missouri, Texas A&M, and then, of course, that home stretch to close it out, 4 straight at home against Jacksonville State, Vanderbilt, Kentucky, and Clemson. So, but I think the thing right now is we just don't know who South Carolina is really. Are they a team that belongs closer to 6th or 7th in the power rankings, or do they belong closer to 11th or 12th? The next 7 games are going to help us determine that greatly, no doubt. At number 9, the Gamecocks opponent this weekend, I've got the Florida Gators in that 9 spot. And let me just say this, by the way, guys, some of you look at that and say, oh, well, this tells me that you're picking Florida to beat South Carolina. Well, guys, these are just the power rankings. It doesn't always work that way, right? Because you have to factor in things like, who's available that upcoming game, home field advantage, the matchup as a whole, right? I mean, there are some teams that are ranked ahead of others that the matchup is much better for that team ranked below than it is above. So it's not a perfect system, but right now, again, Florida was in this 9 spot last week. They won against Vandy. It did not feel right to slide them down in any way after a win. So they stay right in the 9 spot. Now for Florida, it's about for Billy Napier, hey, can they win on the road? Can they win on the road? Can they find a way to be good away from the swamp? Because that's something they have not been able to do at any point during Billy Napier's tenure. So I got Florida staying right now in that 9 spot, South Carolina right below them in that 10 spot, which is going to make for a really, really, really fun game Saturday afternoon at Williams-Brice Stadium. At number 8, I've got the Texas A&M Aggies. I got to learn my lesson, man. I got to learn my lesson when it comes to Texas A&M. Maybe, I thought about ranking Texas A&M 14th just out of pure principle, because it's like every time we start to get reeled back in and thinking, okay, Texas A&M's going to do this, they fall flat on their faces. And I know you didn't have Connor Wegman. I totally get that. But even with that being said, I don't know how much more gettable Bama is going to get. I really don't. And I feel like Jimbo Fisher, the reason he was brought to College Station was to win a game like that, and he still wasn't able to against a Bama team that you felt like was, again, very, very gettable, very beatable. And so Texas A&M, I'm not writing them off to saying they're a terrible team. I'm not saying they're going to go 6-6. There's still tons of talent. We all know that. God forbid, we all know that. That's why we get so lost in predicting Texas A&M. But right now, sliding them down a couple of spots, number 8 in our power rankings this week. Texas A&M, obviously, with a big opportunity this weekend as they take on the Tennessee Volunteers on Rocky Top. At number 7, I've got the Kentucky Wildcats. And I know some folks will have them slid down further. Guys, yes, Kentucky got embarrassed. Yes, Kentucky got thoroughly beat. But Kentucky got thoroughly beat by the best team in college football. Kentucky got thoroughly beat by the back-to-back national champions. And so, did this game confirm that maybe Kentucky's not a contender in the SEC East? Yeah, I think it did. I think it did. But I think that was always a pipe dream. Like, if you were going into last week's game in Athens thinking that Kentucky was going to make some statement, they were going to win the SEC East, I think that's all it was a pipe dream. Really, truly. I still think Kentucky's a high-quality football team. They've got to get Devin Leary figured out. That's the biggest thing because Ray Davis, high-quality running back, Dane Brown, Berrien Brown, Dane Key, They've got fantastic wide receivers. Their defense is solid. They got to get Devin Leary going, man. They just got to get Devin Leary going. So we slide Kentucky down a couple of spots. I'm not ready to completely sell all of my Kentucky stock, though, in the sense of I still think this could be an 8 or even a 9-win team this season. But for now, they do sit at number 7 in our SEC power rankings, right there at that halfway spot. At number 6, I've got the Missouri Tigers. And so Mizzou slides down a couple of spots from last week as well. And I know, listen, guys, again, tough loss on the home field. But they didn't lose to a slouch. This is the LSU Tigers. I think an LSU team that, again, after Ole Miss, we were kind of all out on. We didn't know, we thought, okay, the season's over for them, the Bayou Bengals. They have no shot at going to the college ball playoff. Are they even going to compete in the West? I think LSU proved in that game, and they have no defense. I mean, LSU has literally no defense. But Jaden Daniels, one of the best quarterbacks in college football. They're getting the running game going with Logan Diggs. And then on the Missouri side, I think that defense will bounce back. I really do. The most encouraging thing from that game is Brady Cook and Luther Burden. And guys, what they're doing. I mean, Mizzou is lethal on the offensive side. Cody Schrader as well in the running game. But Luther Burden, guys, he's turned into, you could make an argument he's the best wide receiver in the SEC. Like when you look at the numbers and what he's doing on a week in, week out basis, and teams are going in and they know Luther Burden is Mizzou's guy. They know Luther Burden is the guy they have to stop, and they still can't do it. So we slide down Mizzou. Mizzou and Kentucky, very similar. A pair of losses. I don't, you lost the ball game. You got to move down. But I think a pair of losses to quality opponents. I've got Missouri number 6. And what's fascinating, number 6 Mizzou, number 7 Kentucky. They square off this weekend in Lexington, a night game. Kentucky just a 2.5-point favorite in that ball game. Going to be a lot of fun to watch that one. That could honestly be the game that determines who is the second best team in the SEC East. Speaking of teams vying for second best in the SEC East, the Tennessee Volunteers have got something to say about that, and they are at number 5 in our SEC power rankings. Tennessee makes a significant jump. I know they had the bye week, obviously, but after beating South Carolina, the way they looked in that game, I do think Tennessee's still the second best team in the SEC East right now, and one of the best teams in the SEC with Joe Milton, that offense leading the way. How do they respond losing Brew McCoy? That's going to be a big question for them, and this is a pivotal game for both sides. Texas A&M and the Jimbo Fisher side, you can't afford a third loss. Tennessee and the Volunteer side and Josh Heupel, you need to protect the home field. You got to protect Rocky Top, and this is a huge, huge game for Tennessee in this football game because after Texas A&M, what you have looming, the game in Tuscaloosa against Alabama, that third Saturday in October. Going to be a lot of fun to watch that one. But right now, I've got Tennessee 5th. I still like what they have offensively. I still think the Vols are on pace to have an 8 or maybe even a 9-win season. But this weekend against the Aggies, going to go a long way in determining that. At number 4, I got the LSU Tigers. A gritty, gutsy win on the road in Como, one they absolutely had to have. And I think, guys, here's the thing. I think LSU's still in this SEC West race, believe it or not. They've got to get things figured out defensively. Like, they've got serious problems on a defense that just features way too much talent to play as poorly as they have. But when you've got a quarterback like Jaden Daniels, you got Malik Neighbors on the outside, Logan Diggs at the running back position, do not count out the Bayou Bengals. You look at the way their schedule sets up the rest of the way. It presents itself pretty well for LSU to win a couple of ball games, go into a bye week, and then you've got Alabama. And while it may be wild to think about a 2-loss team could be in the SEC championship, more than likely taking on Georgia, hey, it's possible. It's more than possible with how crazy the SEC West is right now. So do not sleep on LSU. LSU's not out of this thing. LSU's not out of this thing. And as we mentioned before, style points are a bit of a thing of the past. So you look at that 49-39 win over Missouri, which, by the way, Bayou Bengals covered 6.5. Love to see it. But you look at that game. Was it ugly defensively? Yes. Were you down early? Yes. Second half comeback, Jaden Daniels. This defense is doing everything it can to lose ball games. And Jaden Daniels is saying, absolutely not. I will not allow it to happen. I tip my cap to it. I respect the heck out of it. LSU, 4th in our power rankings this week. And again, the Bayou Bengals, they ain't dead yet. At number 3, I've got the Ole Miss Rebels, guys. Ole Miss getting another gutsy, gritty win against the Arkansas Razorbacks. And, dude, Ole Miss is a team, they just kind of keep on keeping on, right? They're just kind of quietly going about their business. Yeah, they lost to Alabama on the home field. That was tough. But bouncing back, beating LSU, now you beat Arkansas. Hey, Ole Miss is still a player in this thing. Ole Miss is absolutely still a player in the SEC West. Do not sleep on the Ole Miss Rebels and Lane Kiffin. They got to get Jackson Dart back going. I thought he was so-so against Arkansas. Continue to, get Quinshon Judkins. I mean, that is their bread and butter. That is their offensive attack. They want to run to pass, not pass to run in that offense. But I like what I've seen from Ole Miss, man. I think Ole Miss, Lane Kiffin's done a fantastic job with that Rebels football program. They're well on pace, I think, to a 9 or maybe even a 10-win season. And they are absolutely still a player in the SEC West race. At number 2, I've got the Alabama Crimson Tide. Just when you think Nick Saban and the Alabama Crimson Tide are dead and we're throwing dirt on the grave, here they go in College Station. And this is not to say that, hey, I picked Bama to go 9-3 over the summer. They could finish 9-3. There's no doubt. They could absolutely finish with a 9-3 mark. But a really, really nice win over the Texas A&M Aggies, especially, guys, when you look at what Jalen Milroe did through the air, which, by the way, we didn't talk about that earlier, but Texas A&M defensively in that secondary, they've still got major issues. We saw it against Miami. We saw it again against Alabama. But, man, tip the cap to Jalen Milroe, what he did, a career high through the air in regards to passing yards, I think attempts as well, and completions, if I'm not incorrect there. But either way, career highs for Jalen Milroe in the passing game. And you get that passing game going, that is a really, really good sign moving forward, I think, for Alabama football and what they can do in the offensive attack. And, I mean, to go into Kyle Field, to go into College Station when so many, including yours truly, were picking Texas A&M to win that football game, it just felt like the no-brainer pick, right? Like, of course Texas A&M is going to beat Alabama. Alabama shows, we're not out of this thing yet. We're still right in this SEC West race. We're still right on the path to go to Atlanta. They got a big one this weekend, of course, against Arkansas. They're big favorites in that one. I think that could be kind of a sneaky trap game. But either way, I think Alabama well-deserving in this 2 spot. And it's funny, after all the chatter early in the season and all the chatter week to week, it still feels like it's the same 2 culprits at the top of the SEC. And at number 1 in our power rankings, the Georgia Bulldogs stay at the number 1 spot. And, guys, I was so thoroughly impressed with that performance by Georgia. It felt like Georgia, hey, they finally woke up. Like, there was finally enough of a test to where they said, night game in Athens. People are talking about Kentucky being a team that's gonna challenge us for the SEC East. They're a real threat, real competitor. Let's go out and show them how wrong they are. And I think that Auburn game might have woke up Georgia as well. I think that Auburn win, right, the growth in that win, and a night game in Athens, I mean, as electric as an atmosphere as you'll see. And I mean, Kentucky was just no match. And I think Georgia flexing their muscles. And I think at least for a week, the chatter of, is Georgia not the best team in college football? Are they not number 1? Saw a lot of comments last week. Georgia's no good. They should be ranked 3rd or 4th or 5th. And, guys, you may still think that. But until Georgia loses a football game or until Georgia gets knocked off the pedestal, I say it every week, but it's true. Georgia should be number 1. And after that performance, a 51-13 drubbing of the Kentucky Wildcats, the more things change, the more they stay the same. And the one constant in these power rankings all year has been the fact that the Dogs are still a creme de la creme in the SEC. Guys, that being said, we're going to jump into another quick break on the side. We'll get into my best bets of the weekend. Hey, kid's hot right now. Kid's hot right now on the gambling trail. And then at 1 o'clock, we got my good friend Chris Lee of Southeastern 14. I believe he will call in to the show as we'll get his full thoughts on everything SEC related and Gamecocks as well. Guys, all that and more on the other side of this break. You're tuned in to the Daily Crow. The Daily Crow is brought to you by our friends at Carolina Cigars. Carolina Cigars has been in operation since 2008, recently taken over by the Peterson family in 2020. Whether you're new to the cigar scene or whether you've been enjoying cigars your entire life, Carolina Cigars has the expertise and knowledge to make your visit to their shop enjoyable. Stop by for a fine cigar and experience their classic cigar lounge where people come together, share conversations, and become friends. So if you're into cigars and you're on Hilton Head Island, you really do need to go by and see them. They offer same-day shipping nationwide, free delivery island-wide for weddings and all special occasions. They're also proud to offer premium cigars at 9 outside humidor locations around Hilton Head Island, and they have special events throughout the year as well. They want to talk to you. They want to engage. They want to share with you their cigar selection they're very proud of and their beautiful cigar lounge. When you're in the Low Country, there's only one place for cigars. That's Carolina Cigars, and there's only one place I get my cigars. That's Carolina Cigars, Hilton Head Island's premier cigar merchant. Come and share your passion. It's all here at Carolina Cigars. Give them a follow on Instagram at Carolina_cigars, or give them a call today at 843-681-8600. That's 843-681-8600. Smoke them if you got them, and tell them that Chris from the Spurs Up Show sent ya. The Daily Crow is also brought to you by our friends over at A1 Air Quality Consultants. Headaches, coughing, running nose while in the office or just in your home, call A1 Air Quality Consultants to have your air checked today. From Columbia to Asheville, Anderson to Charlotte, they are your breath of fresh air for all of your air quality needs. Be sure to give them a call or shoot them a text today at 864-619-2092. That's 864-619-2092. You can also contact them via email at a1airqualityconsultants@gmail.com. Be sure to check them out. We thank A1 Air Quality Consultants for their love and support of the Spurs Up Show, and tell them that Chris from the Spurs Up Show sent ya.
Muscle Dougie, ho.
Ladies and gents, boys and girls, we are back here on this Tuesday, October the 10th, 2023. That being said, guys, we're going to keep the conversation rolling. We've got Chris Lee of Southeastern 14 upcoming at 1 o'clock. Let me also remind you guys, by the way, it's a couple of weeks away, but October the 28th, Saturday, October the 28th, the Gamecocks game against Texas A&M, we will be hosting a watch party at Carolina Cigars in Hilton Head Island, South Carolina. All my low country Gamecocks would love to see you all out there. It is going to be a blast. Going to be one hell of a time. Looking forward to hanging out with you all. Smoke them if you got them, right? Always a pleasure. And I will let you guys know. We'll update you, obviously, on kickoff time and all that good stuff and when we'll be there exactly. But probably going to be an all-day affair at Carolina Cigars, hanging out with you guys, smoking stogies. We'll have some merchandise on hand as well. And, of course, cigars will be for sale. We can hang out in the lounge, smoke cigars. We watch the Gamecocks in Texas A&M and all the SEC action that day as well. Guys, that being said, let's talk a little gambling. Week 7 gambling picks. And before we do, like I mentioned before, yours truly is on a bit of a hot run right now. We went 5-3 last week, 4-1-3 the week prior. We now sit overall record of 25-20-3. And we got a big-time slate of games this week I feel really good about, guys. We'll start Colorado taking on the Stanford Cardinal. This is a Friday night game, by the way. Guys, I love Colorado minus 11. The only thing that scares me about this, this feels too easy. Like, why is Colorado only an 11-point favorite? I think Shedeur Sanders and company, I think they're going to have a field day offensively. Guys, this is not David Shaw's Stanford team. Like, this is not a good Stanford team. Stanford football is not what it used to be. I think Colorado will flex their muscles. This game also being in Boulder, Colorado. I almost said Denver. This game being in Boulder, I think Colorado has a field day. Friday night football. You can go ahead and start your weekend 1-0 and win some big-time money going into the weekend. Alabama taking on the Arkansas Razorbacks. I teased this game in our SEC Power Ranking segment, talking about this could be a trap game for Alabama. I said all that to just say take Alabama minus 19.5. Yes, it's a very big spread. But I truly, genuinely, guys, I question where Arkansas is right now mentally. I question where the Hogs are right now because they are in a really, really tough situation in regards to you've lost a couple in a row. You're hearing the chatter from your fan base about, what should we do with our coach? What should we do with our OC? And you guys know, right? We've been right in the thick of it, how loud that chatter can be. I think Alabama is going to take advantage of that. I think Arkansas, no chance. I think there's no chance. We've seen some of these bigger spread games be, an opportunity for a close ball. I don't see it. I think Alabama's going to run away with this one. I think they're going to take advantage of a hapless Arkansas group, an Arkansas group that's going to continue to reel, that's going to continue to spiral. I think Alabama minus 19.5 in this ball game. I think Jalen Milroe and company keep it rolling, and I think they win this game in blowout fashion. To Rocky Top, Texas A&M and Tennessee. I think this could be one of the most entertaining games of the weekend. On the A&M side, you got Max Johnson, that group of weapons they have on the offensive side with Bobby Petrino. Must-win game for them. No passing defense whatsoever. And then on the Tennessee side, Joe Milton and company, right? How do they respond with no Brew McCoy? But I think that there's going to be a lot of offensive fireworks in this football game. I think you're going to see a lot of points scored. The over 56 is screaming at me, and it should be screaming at you as well. I think this is a high-scoring game, a lot of offensive fireworks, a lot of points in this one. I love the over 56 on Rocky Top between Tennessee and Texas A&M. We move to Columbia, South Carolina. The Gamecocks taking on the Florida Gators, a 3:30 kickoff. Guys, when you look at this game, on the Florida side, you got an offense that's been very inconsistent and at times anemic. And Florida has not been good on the road. You then look at South Carolina, and the weapons are there. They have an offensive explosion on a week-in, week-out basis. But the question is this: what are you going to get from that offensive line? What are you going to get from your running game? And Florida, guys, has been very, very good defensively. This is a defense that's allowing just under 170 passing yards per game. So it's going to be a test. It's going to be a challenge for South Carolina. And I think what you're going to see Florida do, they're going to commit to running the football. They are going to utilize the short passing game. I think they're going to try to play keep away from South Carolina. Will they be successful? We shall see. But I think because of that, I think this is a slower pace game. We've got the accelerated clock rules as well. I love the under 51 in this ball game. Love the under the total. I think, again, this is a game I'm not sure either team scores in the 30s in this ball game. I think a lower scoring contest, again, with a running clock, with the way Florida's going to try to play keep away. And I think South Carolina is going to try to get more offensive balance running the football with Mario Anderson to carry on, joining the host of others as well. Under 51, I absolutely love the play here. I think this goes under the total. I think this is a lower scoring game at Williams-Brice Stadium. Auburn taking on LSU. This game on the Plains at Jordan-Hare. Auburn plus 11, guys. Weird things happen at Jordan-Hare. Weird things happen. And the biggest question going in is, can Auburn move the football on an LSU defense that's been terrible? That's the key word. They've been terrible, right? Absolutely awful. I think Hugh Freeze is going to dial it up. Guys, I'll tell you this. Do not be surprised to see Auburn win this thing straight up. Not because that Auburn top to bottom is a better football team than LSU, but was Auburn a better team than Georgia? No, absolutely not. But weird things happen on the Plains, man. Weird things happen on the Plains. And LSU was a team, to take it back to South Carolina, very, very similar to the Gamecocks, where if Jaden Daniels, not just he has to play well, he has to be Superman to carry LSU past a terrible defense. So I love Auburn plus 11, guys. I think this game could be really, really close, down to the wire. Auburn is very physical defensively. They're going to provide a test for LSU. And I mean, with the way LSU's played defense this year, I think Hugh Freeze could dial some things up for Peyton Thorne, for Robbie Ashford, some trickery as well. I love plus 11. I think weird things happen on the Plains. Do not be surprised to see it happen in this one on Saturday. Southern Cal and Notre Dame. What a game. This is going to be a great rivalry, guys. Notre Dame coming off that terrible loss to the Louisville Cardinal, which, by the way, Louisville looking like last year's TCU right now, as good as they've been. I've got Southern Cal plus 2.5 in this game. I think Southern Cal wins this game straight up. I know they obviously went to the wire with Arizona, and it was a back-and-forth game. I'm taking Caleb Williams, Marshawn Lloyd, that offensive attack. I love what I've seen from Southern Cal thus far. The over in this game is probably good as well, though I don't trust Sam Hartman and the Notre Dame offense to hold up their end of the bargain. I love Southern Cal plus 2.5. I think they win this game straight up behind the arm of Caleb Williams, who I think, guys, probably is going to win the Heisman Trophy back-to-back, believe it or not. And finally, guys, maybe the game of the weekend. I would say it probably is the game of the weekend in college football. On the West Coast, Oregon and Washington will do battle, a 3:30 Eastern kickoff, I believe, in this one. I love the over 67.5, guys. I think points, and more points. You got two fantastic quarterbacks in Bo Nix and Michael Penix Jr. Both these offenses are high-flying. I think we're going to see a lot of points, a lot of back and forth in this one. I think this is going to be such a fun, entertaining game to watch. I think the over 67.5 will cash in this one. So again, guys, we put my 25, 20, and 3 overall record on the line in my plays this weekend. Colorado, minus 11. Alabama, minus 19.5. Texas A&M and Tennessee, over 56. South Carolina and Florida, under 51. Auburn, plus 11. Southern Cal, plus 2.5. And Oregon and Washington, over 67.5. Guys, that being said, let's jump into a quick break. We're going to set the scene for my good friend Chris Lee of Southeastern 14. He will join us to talk all things SEC football, Gamecocks, and much, much more on the other side of this break. All that and more on the other side. You're tuned in to the Daily Crow. The Daily Crow is brought to you by our friends at Carolina Cigars. Carolina Cigars has been in operation since 2008. Recently taken over by the Peterson family in 2020. Whether you're new to the cigar scene or whether you've been enjoying cigars your entire life, Carolina Cigars has the expertise and knowledge to make your visit to their shop enjoyable. Stop by for a fine cigar and experience their classic cigar lounge where people come together, share conversations, and become friends. So if you're into cigars and you're on Hilton Head Island, you really do need to go by and see them. They offer same-day shipping nationwide, free delivery island-wide for weddings and all special occasions. They're also proud to offer premium cigars at 9 outside humidor locations around Hilton Head Island, and they have special events throughout the year as well. They want to talk to you. They want to engage. They want to share with you their cigar selection they're very proud of and their beautiful cigar lounge. When you're in the Low Country, there's only one place for cigars. That's Carolina Cigars, and there's only one place I get my cigars. That's Carolina Cigars, Hilton Head Island's premier cigar merchant. Come and share your passion. It's all here at Carolina Cigars. Give them a follow on Instagram at Carolina_cigars, or give them a call today at 843-681-8600. That's 843-681-8600. Smoke them if you got them, and tell them that Chris from the Spurs Up Show sent ya. The Daily Crow is also brought to you by our friends over at A1 Air Quality Consultants. Headaches, coughing, running nose while in the office or just in your home, call A1 Air Quality Consultants to have your air checked today. From Columbia to Asheville, Anderson to Charlotte, they are your breath of fresh air for all of your air quality needs. Be sure to give them a call or shoot them a text today at 864-619-2092. That's 864-619-2092. You can also contact them via email at a1airqualityconsultants@gmail.com. Be sure to check them out. We thank A1 Air Quality Consultants for their love and support of the Spurs Up Show, and tell them that Chris from the Spurs Up Show sent ya.
Muscle Dougie, ho.
Ladies and gents, boys and girls, we are back here on this Tuesday, October the 10th, 2023. Appreciate each and every single one of you tuning in. We await our good friend Chris Lee of Southeastern 14. He'll join the show in just a moment to talk all things SEC, Gamecocks, everything in between as well. Like I mentioned, guys, JC Sherbert had some things come up, so we're going to get him on later on in the week. We're going to get JC later on in the week to talk all things South Carolina and Florida. We'll probably double up on guests one day this week, so just to let you guys know, that will be the game plan moving forward. Again, guys, Chris Lee is going to call into the show today. And without further ado,
call
here we
from
go.
Chris Lee.
Chris Lee of Southeastern 14 joins the show. Chris, what's going on, my friend? How are you? Appreciate you carving out some time for us today.
Oh, absolutely, and hopefully this sounds okay. I'm in the middle of driving to Clark Lee's press conference here in Nashville, so it might be a little road noise and stuff like that. But we've made that happen before, I'm sure.
Yeah, for sure, Chris. I appreciate you, man. Either way, it sounds great on your end. And you mentioned you're on the way to Clark Lee's presser. Let's start there, man, because obviously we'll touch on all the SEC, of course, the Gamecocks as well. I was actually watching you and Blaine this morning discussing the South Carolina-Florida game, locking in your predictions and giving some very noteworthy stats on that ball game. But obviously you live in Nashville. You're a Vandy guy by heart. What's going on with Vandy football, man? How would you label this season at the halfway point? Has it been a disappointing season, right on par with what you expected? I mean, I feel like back when we talked at SEC Media Days, there was a lot of momentum that, from beating Kentucky and Florida last year, going 5-7. Maybe this could be a bowl team in I believe it's year 3 of Clark Lee, but it just hasn't quite been that season, at least as of yet. Your overall thoughts on Vandy and just what they've been, what you've seen thus far?
Yeah, it hasn't been close to quite, to be honest with you. This was a year that, look, you kind of feel silly having expectations for Vandy, and it sounds dumb in hindsight saying, well, they have a chance to kind of make a little bit more noise this year. But let's look at it. In year 2, Clark Lee goes in 5-7, beats quality Kentucky and Florida teams. And so you're thinking, okay, the natural progression of a rebuilding program is more of that. They had a lot of guys back. They had some obvious weaknesses. I thought that running game was going to be a weakness and pass defense was going to be a weakness. And the problem that Vanderbilt had is the things that they thought would be weaknesses, those two in particular, or at least I thought would be weaknesses, have absolutely been weaknesses. Add to that the part of their pass defense that I thought could be more respectable. Their safeties, all those guys have been hurt. Safeties, backups, you name it. Some of them are playing or playing hurt or not playing at all. And, to add to that, the offensive line has been awful. I think we thought they'd be a lot better. They had 4 returning starters. Same offensive line coach they'd had the year before. And frankly, the year before that. I just thought that when you look at a team that's rebuilding, you kind of take the baseline of where they were with 5-7. You add in the fact that they had a lot of guys returning, that they figured to get better as they develop. It is all just kind of falling apart. I mean, look, we're sitting here at midseason, and their best win is 7 points over Hawaii. That's just not good enough.
And so, Chris, as we are sitting at the halfway point of this 2023 season, and it's crazy to say that time flies truly. What surprised you the most when you look across the SEC? Obviously, not just Vandy. Is there anything that's jumped out to you that maybe you didn't expect, or anything that's just so obvious that has been a surprise to this point in the season as we look up at the halfway point?
Yeah, I think a few things. I think probably number one is LSU's almost complete inability to defend. I think we thought they had talent with Harold Perkins, with Mason Smith, with all those guys. But the thing that we wondered about was corners. They had a couple of new guys in. That's been a disaster. So I think, you kind of figure LSU's got enough talent. Brian Kelly did enough a year ago that you thought that they would get better. And it's been such a disaster. Their offense has been outstanding. Their offense, it's hard to stop, but they get in these games that look like low basketball scores at times. I think that's what's ahead for them. And I just didn't expect. I thought LSU would have a good offense. I didn't think the defense would be this bad. I think some other things, Devin Leary at Kentucky, I thought he'd be much better than he's been. And if he's the guy that he's been at NC State, they're not going to beat Georgia, but it's not going to be as embarrassing. And I think the outlook going forward is going to be better. I think Brady Cook has been a big surprise. I think Brady Cook, until the second half of that LSU game, I'm not saying he was SEC Offensive Player of the Year, but I think he had to be in that discussion. And so I think that his rise has taken Missouri's offense maybe a notch beyond what I thought. I'm sure I'm leaving out some obvious things as I navigate through traffic here, but those are three that just pop immediately.
Chris, let's move the conversation to specifically South Carolina. Gamecocks enter a pivotal game this weekend against Florida, but as you look at them right now, 2-3 overall coming off the bye week, and there's a couple of different ways, Chris, I think you can look at it, because you look at South Carolina, the record is ugly, but you look at the 3 losses, they all come to ranked opponents, but then you look at how they happen. Georgia, very respectable, but against UNC and Tennessee, give up 6 and 9 sacks respectively in those games. You've surrendered over 20 sacks through 5 games, which is just really unheard of. I mean, Chris, I heard a stat. South Carolina is on pace to surrender 59 sacks this season, which would by far be a school record.
Goodness.
When you look at the Gamecocks, though, how do you view them? And are they about where you expected? Did you think they'd be better? Did you think they'd be worse? Because, again, I think there's 2 ways you could spin it. You can look at it as, how the losses have happened, and, maybe South Carolina is closer to a 5-7 team, or maybe they've just played a tough schedule to this point and they're closer to a 7-5 team, or maybe the truth lies somewhere in the middle. Like, how do you evaluate this South Carolina football team right now?
Well, I think you hit in a lot of things that I'm in agreement with in your question there. I think that, to me, the season, well, first of all, my expectations then were a little bit lower than the public. I just looked at, you lose, I think, a couple of DBs to the NFL. And I mean, look at LSU. When you've got really good defensive backs in this day and age, that is a really valuable commodity. And maybe at Alabama and Georgia, you replace those guys, you're plug and play, and it works out okay. But most places, and no offense to South Carolina, are not quite that. That's a small handful of programs that can do that. So that was one of my concerns. I think that's been a concern. I think the other thing is, I think that North Carolina game kind of framed some expectations for their season, because you're going, North Carolina was not at the top of anybody's list of rush the passer teams. And once that happened, you're like, oh boy. And then throw the Juice Wells injury, and you're just looking at a team that, to me, is operating with a very thin margin of error. But this is the good news, I think, for South Carolina. I don't think there's any team or any coach since he's been in the league that has gotten more out of his team in that back third of the schedule than Shane Beamer. I think attitude and good culture are things that can set a team apart in that latter part of the season. Chris, I still have that memory of them winning the Mayo Bowl. I don't even remember who their quarterback was, but they went through 4 guys, that seemed to look like more like me and you than they look like Bryce Young, and he got that team to 7 wins. Mm-hmm. And you look at last year, they beat Tennessee in a game that nobody was expecting to go the way it went. Mm-hmm. They go to Clemson and do something that nobody had done in Death Valley in a long time. I think that the margin for error for them is thin for all those reasons, but you just never count out Shane Beamer to pull a surprise. Look, we're going through bowl projections this morning, and we were looking at them, and somebody had Carolina projected for, it was a lower tier bowl. I don't remember what it was now. I kind of pushed back on that. And then we started going through the schedule. It's like, well, there's 4 or 5 winnable games there. And we know Shane Beamer can win games he's not supposed to win. So I think that, the more I looked at it, I thought, I could see them 6-6ing away to the bowl. Certainly their recruiting's been good. Their culture's been good. I'm not any more down on them long term than I was, but unfortunately some of the things I was concerned about turned out to be valid concerns, and then the line play I just didn't expect to be that bad. But I think he's done a great job developing Spencer Rattler, and I do think that they will find a way to finish better than people think, because that's what Shane Beamer always does.
You mentioned Spencer Rattler, Chris. What stood out to you about his game most? I mean, I think it's obvious he's made, serious strides and the progression and, raising his floor, if you will. But what's jumped out to you more than anything in a guy that, really this South Carolina football team has become sort of a one-man wrecking crew, and it's led by number 7?
I think the mental toughness. There was a lot of noise in the offseason. I was one of the guys that wasn't sure that he could be the quarterback that people thought he would be. I mean, he's had a rough path. I mean, when you were anointed as a Heisman level candidate, you transfer schools, all those things, you kind of put a target on your back. Mm-hmm. And then again, you go to that North Carolina game where they can't protect him. I think to me, just watching Spencer Rattler pull a Houdini act to keep making plays and keeping his team in games, being ahead of Georgia in the third quarter in Athens, all the things he's done, and then again to lose his best weapon coming into the season. I think that kid, I mean, he's not going to win SEC Player of the Year because Carolina's not going to win enough games. And I mean, he may get broken in half before the season's over at this rate too. But I think you could argue that probably nobody has had more value to his team than Spencer Rattler. He's earned a lot of my respect, and I have a feeling he's earned himself some money come next April.
Now, Chris, like I mentioned, I watched you and Blaine discuss this game this weekend, Gamecocks and Gators. And Chris, admittedly, I labeled this game over the summer as South Carolina's most important game of the 2023 season because I felt like South Carolina would be right at this 2-3 mark heading into this football game. And I think this is a game to have any shot, like you mentioned, if you're going to finish better than expected, if you're going to reach 7 or God forbid, maybe even 8 wins, this is a game, it's must win gets thrown around. It almost feels like on a weekly basis, right? Like they're all must wins. I don't know that there's many games you say, well, we can lose that one and nobody will care. But this feels like as much a can't lose game for South Carolina and Shane Beamer effectively as well in year 3, because there were a lot of Gamecock fans, admittedly, Chris, and you might think this is kind of silly. And I would say too that, there's just a lot of folks out there, I think, that had super high expectations for year 3. And the UNC game happened and folks wrote it off as, okay, it's, first game of the year, crazy things can happen. Georgia, you lose that one, but you were very competitive and Georgia's number 1 in the country. But that Tennessee game, Chris, I think it broke a lot of people, a lot of Gamecock fans in the sense of, I think a lot of people are on edge going into this one. I think the attitude is somewhat doom and gloom, as Shane Beamer would label it. But again, you guys talked about this one. What are you most looking forward to in this one? Keys to the game? Just overall thoughts on this matchup between the Gamecocks and Gators. And I think a Gators team that might be a little bit better than we were all expecting over the summer.
Well, look, I get why South Carolina fans left the Tennessee game depressed, but that was one that you looked on the front end. If you're just kind of looking at games dispassionately and you had to say, hey, look, that is a tough one for them to get. Mm-hmm. First of all, I think that I would have liked Carolina's chances a lot better if it had not been for what happened last year. I think any chance that Carolina wasn't going to have Tennessee's attention went by the board last November. So there was that. Number 2, I just thought stylistically that was a tough matchup. Tennessee can really get after the passer, disrupt things with Tennessee's offensive or with South Carolina's offensive line. You knew that was going to be an issue. It was. So to me, throw Tennessee out of the equation, sort of. That was a tough matchup. I look at Florida. Florida's not going to be after a get after the passer team as much as Tennessee was. Certainly not the way that it happened against North Carolina. Florida's not a team that forces turnovers. They've caused 2 all season. Now, by sheer luck, that number's probably going to go up in the second half, but it is what it is. I think, to me, the danger with playing Florida is what they want to do is keep your offense off the field. Teams are averaging, this is from memory, but I think it's right. I think teams are only getting off 53 offensive snaps a game, which is incredible, given that Florida's not forcing turnovers. I think third downs are a big thing. That's where protection comes in. I just don't think this is the nightmarish matchup that the Tennessee game was. And I don't know. I mean, you put this game in a neutral field, play it 100 times, you might literally come out with each team winning 50, but it's not on the neutral field. It's at Williams-Brice, which I think they've got one of the better fan bases in the country in terms of showing up. Carolina fans almost always show up. good, bad, or indifferent. I think that'll be the difference. And I think Carolina's got enough to beat a Florida team that's solid, but I don't think it's overpowering.
So what you're saying is, Chris, you are a believer in Cocktober. I heard Blaine talk about that on the show that you guys had. It seems like Cocktober, the Gamecocks come alive.
Yeah, I think that's kind of in this phrase that you can make it into a word. I mean, November is really when they do their damage, but it's become a thing. It's fun, and hey, for this one, why not?
To your point, though, Chris, about the home field advantage, it's interesting how this year, home field has always played a huge part, but I think because of the parity we're seeing, because of the portal and NIL, does it feel like to you like home field advantage doesn't mean everything, but in a lot of these 50-50 coin flip games, you can almost just look at it and say, okay, who has the home field? Go with them for the pick. Like it just feels like home field is, especially if you've got them on your home field at night. I know for South Carolina, it feels like it makes all the difference in the world. Are you seeing that as well? And what's your thoughts on the overall parity in the SEC? Because again, especially the SEC West, it feels like we have more of that than ever now.
Yeah, I agree with pretty much all of that. I don't know that on it being right, but there are 3 games that this week, according to basically what Vegas is saying and what the computers that I look at say, they're pick'em games on a neutral field. One of them is Florida, Carolina. One of them is A&M, Tennessee. One of them is Kentucky, Missouri. I think that the margins there are 1 or 2 points on a neutral field in every case. And when we made our picks, I took the home team every time. Just maybe it was a lazy way out for lack of a better idea. Maybe you feel stupid if you pick against those teams at home, but whatever the reason, I did it. I think you're right. To add to kind of your point about parity, look, I don't always like the way the sausage has been made in NCAA football so far. I don't like the tampering. I don't like the fact that you can't watch your team grow up. As soon as a guy gets good, he's open to the highest bidder on all those things. But what it is made for is amazing parity. If you want to watch me do some gymnastics today, go watch the live stream we did about an hour ago, where we're trying to pick playoff teams. And we literally went through, 15 teams that sort of kind of have a shot, and listen to me hedge my bets and everything. And look, I don't know how you do it otherwise, to be honest. You have a lot of teams that to me aren't separated by a lot. You have some brutal conference schedules coming up. I think the Pac-12 is going to be fascinating on how that resolves. I think, to me, I don't get all this opposition to the 14 playoff. I think it's going to be fascinating. I think parity is good for the game. And I think, my goodness, you're seeing maybe as much of it as we've seen in our lifetime. It is making for a super interesting product.
Chris, switching gears and moving to the SEC West, Alabama made a statement in College Station. Jalen Milroe set career highs in passing yardage. Your thoughts on the Crimson Tide at this point? I think many of us maybe were prematurely throwing dirt on the graves of Alabama football when they fell to Texas, and then they really had that debacle against South Florida. But maybe they're starting to find something, get it rolling. Your overall thoughts on Alabama and, where they sit in the SEC West race, because it's funny, after an offseason, a conversation in the first couple of weeks, we find ourselves at the halfway point. It feels like we're talking about Georgia and Alabama. Like time is a flat circle, if you will.
Yeah, I feel like the correct answer is it was premature to bury them. I don't think it's also right to put them on the shelf with most of Nick Saban's teams. They're still averaging under 6 yards an offensive snap. That is very un-Alabama-like. I still don't know exactly what their identity is. I think that's going to be game planned and figured out among, based on who the opponent is. I thought it was interesting a couple of weeks ago. Mississippi State has been getting torched through the air, and Alabama ran it like 3 times as much as it passed it. And you're going, okay, that's the formula. And then they go to A&M, and Jalen Milroe's out there playing like Bryce Young. And hitting Jermaine Burton, and he has almost 200 yards, and you're like, well, wait a minute, where did this come from? I think it goes to show you, I don't think that they have anything close to the offensive upside they've had in recent years, but they've also got the best coach in the history of maybe college sports at the helm. They've still got plenty of talent if you put stock in recruiting rankings. But they've still got enough. I think there's not a game left on their schedule that you can't make the case that they are going to win. But I don't think this is going to be vintage Alabama where they just go and blitz everybody by 30 or 40 points.
Chris, sticking with the SEC West, whose future are you more concerned about? Jimbo Fisher at Texas A&M or Sam Pittman at Arkansas?
Wow. And, what's funny is I thought of a third coach too. I thought you were going to say Zach Arnett. I think the easy answer is Sam Pittman because the buyout isn't as steep, obviously, as Jimbo's whatever the insane number is today. At the same time, man, let's say A&M doesn't win in Knoxville, which I don't think it'll do. That's one that's going to start burning itself down quickly.
Mm-hmm.
I think. I don't know how much in the grand scheme of things Miami blowing the games at Georgia Tech means, but that's just kind of another log on the fire at that point, right? You could say, well, hey, maybe Miami was a national title contender. I think we can say that's not the case now. I thought they were going to win that Alabama game. I think they thought they were going to win that Alabama game. I think the answer would be Jimbo Fisher, but the money part of it, I presume they'll come up with it, but I don't know the ins and outs of that situation. But man, that is a really good question. I don't think that the Sam Pittman stuff is fair. The upside with Arkansas just isn't there that it is with A&M because of the money and all that. I think people forget how bad a situation he took over with Chad Morris. I think he'd have been better off if they won a couple fewer games his first year in a way, because then it looks more like improvement and trajectory. It's funny how it's kind of better to set the bar low to begin with. Sam Pittman didn't really do that. He did stuff within the first year or two that I don't think people realistically had on the table as a possibility at the time. And I don't know. I filibustered a lot to answer your question. I don't know. Maybe now that I've thought about it, I guess Pittman's still the answer, but that's a good one.
Chris, I'm going to keep throwing some zingers at you. I hope you don't mind. Who would you be buying stock
in?
Right?
That's what makes it fun.
Yeah. Who would you? Yeah. This one may be a little bit easier though. Who would you be buying stock in right now in the SEC East in regards to finish in that number 2 spot? Tennessee, Kentucky, Mizzou, obviously all candidates. I mean, I don't want to completely put South Carolina out of it, but I think it would take one hell of a run over the last 7 games or so. But of the obvious, Tennessee, Kentucky, Mizzou, who's the team right now that you're still buying stock in?
Okay, help me out with this a little bit. I don't have schedules in front of me. Tennessee is at Kentucky this year, I believe?
I believe so, yes.
Okay, I think by process of schedule elimination, I have favored Kentucky over Missouri this weekend. So that would give Kentucky a little bit of an edge there. Tennessee's remaining schedule is brutal, maybe tougher than anybody's in the country. And that's even giving them a win over A&M that I think it's going to happen, but I'm not convinced of it. You throw Kentucky, Missouri in Lexington. I mean, Kentucky, Tennessee in Lexington. I think that game's winnable for Kentucky. I know it probably sounds crazy the way that Kentucky got boat race this weekend, but I think just based on what every team has banked and based on where that game's going to be played, I'll probably go with Kentucky at this point.
Chris Lee of Southeastern 14 does a fantastic job. Chris, last thing before I get you out of here, talk a little bit about Georgia. I feel like, Chris, Georgia's been very interesting and almost kind of a victim of their success in the sense of, we talk about all this parity in college football, but you look at Georgia, the start of this season, there was a different expectation for them. Georgia's being judged against not if they're the best team in the SEC or, they're being judged against, are they going to be back-to-back national champions? And so I almost feel like they were being judged a little unfairly or overcritically, if you will. I know South Carolina played them in a really tight game, but you look at the offensive numbers, and they've dealt with a slew of injuries, but Carson Beck is literally on pace to set single-season passing yards records at the University of Georgia. I know they're not running the football the way they want to, but I feel like that game against Kentucky on Saturday night, that was sort of the reminder that Georgia's still the creme de la creme, not just in the SEC, but I think I could argue all of college football. Your thoughts on the Dogs? Obviously, I know your guy Blaine is a very passionate, very passionately covers the Bulldogs, if you will, talks about Georgia. But your overall thoughts on Georgia? I'm sure you guys have had many conversations about the Dogs at this point in the season.
Yeah, that to me was a sort of a harbinger game for what might be ahead, because there were several narratives that you could have embraced on Georgia. One is which, Carson Beck is just not Stetson Bennett. One of which was you looked at the computers and they just were not as high on Georgia. And then you saw Georgia, 6th, 7th, 8th in some of the computer polls coming to that Kentucky game. And the schedule had not been great. I know Beck has put up some big numbers, but there was kind of the question of who was it against. Well, then they go out and face a Kentucky pass defense that is really good. And he throws, I think, for 11 yards an attempt and just lights them up. And that game is over before the end of the first quarter. And the questions that I had going into that one, Chris, were, is Georgia really not as good? Or is this just a team that has won back-to-back national titles and is just kind of bored with things? I mean, you saw it last year. They Kent State made that a game in the fourth quarter. That happened to them a couple times where it was just kind of not national championship level football. And then they get to TCU and they flip a switch. And that was the biggest bloodbath in the history of championship games. I kind of wondered that going into the Kentucky game. I thought stylistically Kentucky could give them some problems with some stuff. And I'm not saying that you don't see Georgia play kind of pedestrian football again in some of these games. I think that's part of their DNA. But that showed me that Georgia still has it in it just to flip a switch and annihilate whatever it's in its path. And that is not really good news for the rest of the league.
Chris Lee of Southeastern 14 does a fantastic job. Chris, we'll definitely get you back on the airwaves when we can see your face and get you on the video side of things. But let Chris, by the way, let folks know in case they're not familiar where they can check out all you guys' work.
Yeah, what we do, the idea of Southeastern 14 is that if you want specific info on your team, you're going to do a better job getting your Gamecock stuff from Chris and all the great people on that feed, many of whom are my friends. But if you're looking for a one-stop landing spot of guys, and all they do is they just study the league and try to know all 14 teams and how they stack up against each other, that's what we're here for. And we do that for football, basketball, and baseball. We've got content coming out basically every day. I think we had 130-something videos last month on everything under the sun related to the SEC. We've started our basketball coverage. We'll be bringing back our baseball coverage, I'm sure, starting in January. We're thinking about kicking around the idea of doing a daily show. Hope we can pull that off. If you're looking just for a really good spot to get your fix on the SEC, I think you're going to love what we do, and go find it on YouTube at Southeastern 14.
Chris, always a pleasure, my friend. Keep up the great work, and we'll chat again soon.
Yeah, my apologies. I hope my audio was good while I was driving, but thank you for having me.
Absolutely, man. Appreciate you. Great stuff, guys. Chris Lee of Southeastern 14 does a fantastic job of covering the entire league. I highly suggest and encourage you guys go check out Chris Lee and all of his work, and the entire team there as well. They all do a great job. And of course, guys, basketball season's upcoming. Baseball will be here before you know it. And they, like us, cover the entire league and all of the sports, not just football. So, guys, that being said, that's going to do it all for us. I see Brennan M. looks like he's having a fun day at work in the Discord. Football Frank said that College Ball News moved South Carolina up 15 spots on a bye week. He said, let's take another week off. If only it worked that way, my friend. If only it worked that way. Guys, let me also mention, for some reason, iTunes did not distribute one of our podcasts from yesterday, so I do apologize for that. That should not be an issue moving forward, but for some reason, the top priorities for after the bye week or coming out of the bye week, it did not publish that episode. It did not publish that episode. So John Edward says 12 to 2 show becoming shorter. John Edward, the 12 to 2 show, it's 12 to 2, but it's 12 until we just knock out all of our topics. So if it takes us an hour and a half, so be it. If it takes us 2.5, so be it. And there will be some shows that run long, but there's no point, John Edward, and like I said, filling dead air with nothing. So anyways, guys, appreciate you all tuning in. Again, like I said, be sure to follow along all the content, everything on social media, content bleeding out of the eyeballs. And of course, guys, check out the podcast, iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, where you get your podcast, and hit that subscribe button on YouTube. Hit that bell icon so you get notifications when we go live. We drop new video content as well. Show rocking noon to 2 all week long this week, our normal schedule. And then, of course, the post-game call-in show will take place Saturday following the Gamecocks game against the Gators. Immediately following that football game, we will be live right here taking your questions, your comments, and your calls. But guys, until then, appreciate you all tuning in. Thank you all so much. Have a great rest of your Tuesday, and we will talk to you all tomorrow.